Today, we're getting into something really quite significant. It's this recent diplomatic re-engagement between India and China. And, this isn't just your average headline. It's pretty complex stuff, right?
Absolutely. There are layers here, significant
Yeah,
layers.
layers with big global ripples. We're going to try and unpack it for you. I mean, when you think about it, India and China, they're two enormous global players. Population, economy.
Exactly. So any shift in how they relate to each other, well, it sends waves everywhere.
And we've got some pretty detailed insights, don't we? High-level meetings, actual agreements. It seems like things are really moving.
That's right. And our mission here really is to boil all that down for you. We want to pull out the most important bits from the sources, give you a shortcut to understanding what's actually going on with this strategic shift. So we're not just looking at what happened. We need to understand why it's happening now and, what it means for the bigger picture. So we'll be hitting the key things. Those recent big meetings, the practical steps, like getting flights and trade going again.
Right. The tangible stuff.
Exactly. And these new confidence-building measures, the CBMs, and maybe most importantly, the underlying reasons, the geopolitics driving it all.
Okay, let's dive in there then, the why now question.
Yeah.
The sources seem to point pretty clearly towards one major factor, right? This idea of U.S. trade pressure, specifically the Trump tariffs.
Yeah, that narrative is definitely strong in the material. The idea that this external pressure, particularly those steep tariffs, has kind of nudged New Delhi and Beijing towards talking again. But it's more than just reacting, isn't it? It ties into this broader theme we see with both countries. It's about strategic autonomy, wanting to diversify their relationships, not be overly dependent on any one global power.
So it's like they're trying to carve out more independent paths. Hedging their bets, maybe?
Exactly. It's a kind of strategic de-risking, broadening their options, asserting that they'll set their own course, which, could really reshape how global power dynamics work.
Interesting. So this push for autonomy, how did that translate into action? What was the first, concrete sign of this thaw?
Well, the really big recent event was the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, visiting New Delhi. That was August 18th and 19th, just now in 2025.
Okay.
And that was a big deal because it was the first visit like that in 3 whole years, after quite a bit of frostiness, frankly.
3 years is a long time in geopolitics.
It really is.
And he met with everyone, right? G. Shankar, Doval, even PM Modi. That's a serious itinerary.
A very packed schedule, yes. He met with the external affairs minister, the national security advisor, and the prime minister.
So what was on the table? What were they actually talking about?
It was pretty broad, actually. They covered the expected things like border stability, always a tricky one between them, but also wider economic cooperation, regional issues. It wasn't just focused on the negatives. It suggests they want a more comprehensive dialogue now.
And Prime Minister Modi's comments seemed quite positive. He mentioned steady progress and talked about respect for each other's interests and sensitivities. Is that standard diplomatic language, or is there more to it this time?
That's a great question. I mean, yes, you hear phrases like that in diplomacy, but the context here is key. Coming after such a long gap, and with China echoing similar sentiments, they described relations entering a steady development track, it feels different.
Like a coordinated message.
Exactly. That symmetry is notable. It suggests a mutual public desire to stabilize things, maybe a shared understanding that, given everything else going on globally, they need to find a way to manage this relationship better.
Okay, so the high-level talks sound promising. But what about, actual changes, things people can see? Are they moving beyond just talk?
They are, and that's crucial. The big one is resuming direct flights.
Ah, right. That was suspended for ages, wasn't it?
5 years. Imagine the impact that had. Businesses, families. So restarting flights is a very tangible step. It affects real people directly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't just flights, was it? Something about border trade, too.
That's right. They've agreed to reopen border trade through 3 specific points. The sources mention Natula Pass, for example.
Which is quite a well-known crossing point.
It is, historically and economically important for that region. So again, it's about getting things physically moving again, people and goods.
So if we zoom out a bit, these practical steps, the flights, the trade points, they're not just logistics, are they? They're part of building confidence back up.
Precisely. This is where it gets meaningful. It moves beyond just diplomatic statements. Resuming flights and trade, these are operational things. They signal a real thaw in economic ties, and frankly, they help rebuild trust bit by bit just through facilitating normal interaction. It makes the whole re-engagement feel more real.
Got it. But trust, especially after the tensions they've had, it needs more than just open borders, right? It needs, like, rules of the road. Which brings us to these confidence-building measures, or CBMs you mentioned. What exactly are they putting in place?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think. It's about the mechanics of keeping the peace. What's different now seems to be a focus on setting up actual systems, institutionalized ways to talk and manage things.
Okay, like what?
Well, things like expert groups, working level bodies, specifically tasked with managing communication along the border.
So not just relying on a hotline call when things flare up.
Kind of. It suggests they understand that de-escalation needs consistent day-to-day coordination at an operational level, not just top-level political agreement, which can change, you know?
Yeah,
It feels more practical, more grounded.
that makes sense. Building the plumbing for peace, almost.
Yeah, something like that.
And you mentioned the expanded flights again here, as a CBM itself.
Yes. Facilitating connectivity is seen as a confidence measure, too.
And there was the religious pilgrimage aspect that Kailash Manasarovar Yatra specifically mentioned.
Right. Allowing that facilitates people-to-people ties, which builds goodwill.
Plus, collaboration on trans-border river data. That sounds potentially very important, given shared water resources.
Hugely important. Managing shared resources like water requires ongoing cooperation and data sharing. It's a practical necessity that also builds interdependence and, hopefully, trust.
So these CBMs, taken together, they're really about creating frameworks, predictability.
Exactly. Frameworks for ongoing dialogue, for cooperation. The aim is to reduce those friction points systematically, to build stability into the relationship for the long haul, using these institutional mechanisms to keep things on an even keel.
Okay, so that's the bilateral picture. But they're not just talking to each other, are they? They seem to be coordinating more on the world stage, too, in places like BRICS.
Yes, that's another key dimension, the multilateral coordination.
But tell us about the BRICS angle. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Right. So within BRICS, there's this interesting reciprocity happening. China is set to back India hosting the 2026 BRICS summit.
Okay.
And then India will return the favor, supporting China for the 2027 summit.
A bit of diplomatic back-scratching.
You could call it that. But it signals alignment, or at least smooth coordination, within that important bloc of emerging economies.
And it's not just BRICS. There's the SEO summit, too, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yes, another major Eurasian platform. The sources say PM Modi has accepted President Xi's invitation to attend the upcoming SEO summit in Tianjin. That's scheduled for end of August, early September 2025.
So high-level attendance, mutual support in these big forums. What does that signal to, say, the U.S. or Europe?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Is this just pragmatic cooperation where their interests align, or is it the start of something more like a unified front? Either way, this kind of coordination definitely boosts their collective standing. It allows them to project influence on certain global issues. It certainly sends a message that multilateralism might be shifting, with different power centers carrying more collective weight.
Right. A potential shift in the global order, maybe.
Potentially. Or at least a more complex one.
Okay, so let's quickly recap for everyone listening. This deep dive has really walked us through a significant shift, hasn't it? We've seen these high-level meetings kick things off after a long pause.
Yep, Wang Yi's visit was key.
And the concrete steps, direct flights coming back, border trade points reopening, real tangible changes.
Crucial for building back economic ties and trust.
And these new CBMs, the confidence-building measures, focusing on setting up systems, like for border communication and resource management.
Building those frameworks for long-term stability.
Plus, this coordination in global forums like BRICS and the SEO.
Showing a more aligned face on the world stage.
And underlying it all seems to be this driver of strategic autonomy, trying to navigate pressures from powers like the U.S.
That seems to be a major thread running through it, so we really hope digging into the sources like this has given you those essential nuggets, a clearer picture of what's driving this India-China recalibration. It's definitely a relationship to keep a close eye on.
Absolutely. Its global impact is just undeniable. And maybe a final thought for you to chew on, building on all this. Considering this pretty comprehensive strategic re-engagement we're seeing between India and China, how might this evolving dynamic start to reshape multilateralism itself? And looking beyond just them, what new opportunities or maybe challenges could this create for stability across the wider region? Something to mull over.